Okay, well, we'll get started here as people come in. So good morning/afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by the CHA, Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, Energy Safety Canada, and CSA Group. In this webinar, we will be exploring existing industry standards, identify regulatory gaps, and discuss the future demand for hydrogen safety measures. My name is Tony Saha, Marketing and Communications Manager at the Canadian Hydrogen Association, and I'm speaking to you today from Edmonton, Alberta, which is the traditional, ancestral, and ceded territory of many First Nations, such as the Cree, Dene, Anishinaabe, and Blackfoot. For those of you who are not familiar with the CHA, we are a national industry association established in 2009 with a history that spans over 50 years. With regional affiliates in BC, Alberta, and Ontario, we support our members with advocacy, communications, networking, and government relations. We represent over 200 Canadian companies, academia, consultancies, research agencies, and end users who are developing, demonstrating, and deploying hydrogen technologies in Canada today. If you or your organization is not yet a member of the CHA and are interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to me after this webinar. Currently, the CHA is recruiting co-exhibitors for the Canada Pavilion at H2 Meet in Seoul, Korea, coming up this September, and for the Hydrogen Technology Expo coming up in Hamburg, Germany this October. Attending with the CHA will make your organization eligible for partial travel reimbursement, B2B matchmaking support, and networking opportunities. If you are interested in this, please reply to the email I will be sending to all registrants after this webinar. So some housekeeping rules before I introduce our speakers for today. Please note that this webinar will be recorded and held in accordance with the CHA's competition law compliance policy. Please feel free to enter any questions that you may have in the chat section. We'll be sure to get to them during the Q&A segment following the presentations, where you will also be able to turn on your mics and cameras. Now, introducing our guest speakers for today, Nirmal Nanaprogazam is the principal scientist at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories and brings over 17 years of experience in hydrogen and clean energy research. He currently leads the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Centre, serves as a researcher and business liaison for the Hydrogen Technologies branch, and consults on policy, economics, and sustainability to achieve a net zero emissions future. Chris Davis is the Manager of Operations and Business Development at Energy Safety Canada. In this role, he provides strategic direction to ESC's leadership team while advancing best-in-class scalable health, safety, and training solutions into the ever-evolving energy sector. Mark Salakeld is the VP of Business Development and Partnerships. Mark is also a prominent figure at Energy Safety Canada, advocating for safety standards and best practices across all traditional and emerging energy sectors. His commitment to sustainable development and community growth drives his efforts in mentoring startups and connecting them with essential resources. Last but not least, Melanie Paneton is the Manager of Strategic Initiatives focusing on hydrogen in the Standards Division at CSA Group. She is responsible for coordinating and supporting the development of the hydrogen-focused activities at CSA Group, including standards, research, advocacy, and education from production to end use. So without further ado, moving on to our first speaker of the day, Nirmal, take it away.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks everyone for joining. Let me share the screen. So again, as Tony mentioned, so I'm a principal scientist here at Canadian Nuclear Labs. And the slide deck you're going to see is already part of the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center. So I'm going to just walk you through a brief on the center and why we need it and what we are going to do with the center. But prior to that, why Canadian Nuclear Labs and hydrogen? And we get asked, unless you know about us already, there's always a question of why nuclear and hydrogen and why CNL is doing this center. So this slide is a quick snapshot. CNL has been doing hydrogen R&D for more than 50 years. So we have seen the hydrogen industry for a long time, like within the nuclear industry, mainly supporting the CANDU reactors. If you're familiar with the Canadian nuclear reactor design, they need heavy water. So we started with the hydrogen water exchange technology developments through catalyst, materials testing, and process development, and then moved into hydrogen safety for nuclear reactor containment and support systems, hydrogen production using next generation nuclear heat and electricity. And more recently, we are sort of trying to integrate our capabilities into the non-nuclear sector since hydrogen is evolving into an energy carrier for multiple sectors and industrial applications. So we have capabilities covering all areas of hydrogen, but we focus on things that are emergent in the market and required by the industry, and we evolve with the industry. We have done that for nuclear. We are doing it with the non-nuclear industries going forward. So in terms of sort of some of the world-leading expertise, so we have developed what we call a wet-proof catalyst, which is one of a kind. We use it for several different applications. When it comes to the hydrogen isotopes, deuterium and tritium, we are like the world-leading experts. And in terms of forming centers or creating national centers, our lab is an example of that. So it's a national nuclear science and technology company based mainly in Chalk River. But more recently, we have launched the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center. And on the nuclear fusion world, we have also launched the Fusion Innovation Canada. Both are national centers in helping the industry to grow. So the Canadian Hydrogen Safety Center, again, it's easier to answer some of the like a concept like this with the 5 W's and H. So I'll go through that in the next few slides. So why do we need such a national center? So one of the things we learned early on when it comes to hydrogen safety, especially from the nuclear industry background and going outwards. So we, again, in the nuclear industry, we call it levels of protection or layers of protection. So in the funnel diagram you see is something of a similar context, but we are trying to understand when hydrogen is used in newer applications, what are the levels needed and why are they needed? So this question needs to be answered by every single company, entity, group trying to get into hydrogen. And we have done this, we have accomplished this in the nuclear industry, and we want to help other industries to establish these levels as needed by your application. Not all applications will need these, but this is where the center is going to focus. So we're going to do the consultation, we're going to talk to industries, especially who are new to hydrogen. They're trying to figure out how to handle it, and the handling is the key word. And how do you handle hydrogen at very large quantities? So we are talking about small refueling stations. One of hydrogen handling in smaller companies or smaller scales is probably currently done today. But if the adoption of hydrogen takes place and expands to the industrial levels of, again, how much, say, natural gas is currently handled or diesel and gasoline is handled, if that scale is happening, even in any part of the country, the risks and the mitigation measures change significantly. So the center is going to look at every single member's sort of requirements, but also look at from a sectoral perspective. In terms of what the center is, so the center is going to be a membership-based organization. We are going to incorporate it as a not-for-profit organization as well, meaning that the sole purpose of the center is to establish safe operations of hydrogen or safe handling of hydrogen in the country across all sectors, all applications. And the center itself will have 2 layers of membership: governing members, supporting members. Governing membership is the companies and industries that have the problems and they need the solutions, which will be provided by the supporting members layer. Every outcome of the center is going to be through projects, even if it means like coming up with a procedure or a policy or a protocol. Everything will be done as projects. And then the administration of the center itself, because it's an NFP. So we also have an outreach program as part of the administration, which is to mainly the educational piece. Again, Mark and Chris will talk about their sort of Energy Safety Canada and their training programs, which is, again, one of the components we'll make use of. But the key message from this slide you can take with you is the forecasting industry needs. So it's very critical, and we have done this for nuclear. We preempted the problems, solved it, and the reactors are operating safely. even in extreme conditions, they will work. So this is the message we are sort of bringing it through the center. Where the center will play a role, as I said, it's across all hydrogen applications, across all industries. What you see in this diagram is just an example or sort of a snapshot of where we see currently the gaps and where the center will start working with various entities and stakeholders. So again, like starting from the electrical grid and natural gas grid, because hydrogen is an energy carrier, it has to be made from using an energy source. So from that until the end use on the right-hand side here, either it's industrial end use, mobility end use, or even all other end uses where hydrogen could play a role, all these areas have some form of gap that we are going to look at and help the industry and the respective stakeholders to understand what are they, how to mitigate, and how to sort of continue their operations and evolve some of these like whatever mechanisms they want to use. So codes and standards are one of them, the technology solutions or other means that will help them to move forward with the hydrogen sort of business. When again, it's a busy sort of timeline there, but it just shows our journey, the CNL team sort of taking this concept as the center and moving towards sort of incorporation. So we started almost like in November 2022. We are hoping to incorporate it by November 2024. So it took us 2 whole years to go through, again, engaging industry, talking to companies. I've spent at least 65 or more Teams calls one-to-one with companies and stakeholders of all colors and shapes, trying to get an understanding of why and what they will need from the center. So it's been tremendous learning for the CNL team, and we have engaged our sort of management, and they have approved the incorporation. And all in all, CNL again is going to be a governing member and is investing the money that is needed. And CNL will not sort of benefit directly from the center, but we are doing it because it is of a national importance. So who is involved? So currently we have, again, 2 governing members and 7 supporting members who have sent their signed letters of commitment. And we are continuing to engage, again, with more members who are interested in joining, and we are gathering their information. So we are almost at the last step before incorporation. So the lawyers are working on it. So we will reach out to anyone who wants to join. So again, there's an email in this PowerPoint deck, or you can reach out to me or anyone from CNL through CHA as well, if you want to inquire more about the center. So how we are going to do it, I briefly touched on it. So the not-for-profit corporate structure gives certain benefits in operating such a center. So there's going to be, again, 3 full-time positions. There's executive director, operations director, and projects director. And the board will make decisions through a board of directors. And the board of directors will have committees that will inform them on various aspects of the center, including the program of work, which I'll get to it next. The pyramid on the right is sort of gives you the approach that the center will take. And we are literally building this pyramid for the industry in Canada. So the bottom of the pyramid is a key where we bring in not just the center, which is CHTSC, we bring the members, their expertise, their experience. We also bring in authorities having jurisdiction. We also bring other centers. We'll bring standards developers like Melanie, CSA, and others, just for the knowledge base and building that sort of consultancy framework where when we start looking at a problem, we know that if there is a solution exists or the problem has been solved elsewhere, or what are the contexts around. And then, as I mentioned, the forecasting, we need as many eyes and people and brains as possible. So from that consultancy box at the bottom, we start developing the problem definition, solution, and then how that will be compliant, and eventually achieving that top of the pyramid, which is the safe operations. So, and each step is going to take a lot of effort, and the center is going to do that coordination and bring all the stakeholders together. So in terms of the other how the center is going to operate and work across various sectors in the country on hydrogen. So right now we have 4 areas of programs, again, covering most of the sectors where we see hydrogen has a role to play. And each area has its own sort of sub circles there. It looks almost like Mickey Mouse. So it's easier to remember that. But so the idea is to cover each of the areas where hydrogen will play a role in the long term and help these sectors and companies involved on how to look at and forecast issues and preempt a solution and fix it, and then that gets them going. And all in all, the center itself will not do any work. So they will create projects. Within the projects, the members, supporting members, and other subcontractors will help develop the work and solve the problems. So that's sort of what I wanted to present. There are more slides at the back of the slide deck you will get. You can have a look, and you can definitely contact me or others at CNL, and we can help you solve this out. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nirmal, for that presentation. Next up is Chris Davis and Mark Selkeld with Energy Safety Canada.
Thanks, Trini. There we go. I think my presentation should be up.
Yes.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to present here and share the story of Energy Safety Canada this morning. And Mark and I are joining from Calgary today. That's our head office for Energy Safety Canada, and we'll just share some of the history of the organization, our mandate, and we'll have time for questions with the rest of the group here towards the end of the hour. So yeah, Energy Safety Canada. We go back a little ways, but we are Canada's safety association for the energy sector, and the vision, mission, and behaviors stated on the screen there really drives our mandate just to support the energy sector. And really, as the energy sector evolves, the partnership with CHA and the now emerging association that Nirmal was speaking of, it was kind of a natural fit. And I think that'll become fairly clear here towards the end of the presentation. But as the 3 organizations work together to fill those roles, we're driven by strategic objectives. So our governance-driven strategy represents industry priorities, and we set out a 5-year plan through our strategic articulation map, Safety Center of Excellence, where we drive innovation, support for employers through improved safety performance, through initiatives like data analytics and best practices, workers support, right down to the frontline worker providing standardized safety training and communications engagement. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment, but through our standardized communications and scalable safety alert systems, there's a number of communications and engagement pieces going on there, as well as our BANF conference. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes as well. Our history. Well, Energy Safety Canada actually started in 1949 as an extension program at the University of Alberta Petroleum Industry Training Service. Bounced along like that for a number of decades through the 1980s, when we opened up a training center in Nisku, Alberta, near Edmonton. Merged with the Petroleum Safety Council in 2005, and the Oil Sands Safety Association that you see on the screen there in 2017, now to become Energy Safety Canada. Petro LMI, which is now was the Petroleum Human Resources Council of Canada. They rolled in 2014 to round out some labor market information data that we that we count on and representing that for the industry. And as you can see under our current brand now, we've been around for since 2017, but certainly deep expertise in the energy sector for quite a long time. Our governance, as mentioned, our governance is really representative of our funding model, and I'll tell you a little bit about that here in an upcoming slide as well. But our owners are the producers, geologists and geophysicists, drilling sector, small energy producers, as well as the energy services sector, and also Pathways Alliance, which represents the pipeline sector. And it's this governance really that is our expertise, and I'll speak to that here in a moment as well. The funding model I spoke to before. Well, we're kind of a hybrid organization. We're a charitable not-for-profit. We receive funding from the Western Province's work comp boards and by way of a funding levy on the employers that are in our funding codes. And that's, I would say, about the 1/4 part of our funding model. The other 3/4 part essentially comes from scalable and standardized training solutions. So all of our training, regardless of modality, really lives in a scalable distribution model that that is self-supporting and funds itself. So on behalf of industry with standardized training. And as it says up on the screen there, that self-sustaining model supports the maintenance and upkeep, care and feeding of standardized training across the sector. So what does that mean? Standardizing safety. It is our mandate, and it's driven by those industry priorities, and that really is our expertise. Our expertise isn't the technical, it's the governance, the facilitation, taking that problem statement on behalf of our stakeholders through to delivery of a scalable and sustainable solution, and then hosting those scalable solutions on a foundation of efficiency, integrity, innovation, and experience. Whether that's a training program, a technical bulletin, safety alerts, facilitating all of the steps that go into the care and feeding of those and the development of those. And what is that supported by? Well, we've got 5 physical locations throughout Western Canada right now, but we support the industry from coast to coast. 130 people, most of those in Calgary in the head office, where all of the different elements you see on the screen are supported. Port St. John, British Columbia, Fort McMurray, Nisku, Alberta, as mentioned, is our main field training center, and Weyburn, Saskatchewan, in addition to the Calgary head office. The part of our distribution model, though, is bringing that knowledge as close to the work face as we can, and part of that is through employer and regulatory interactions, where we bring our expertise to those meetings and those sites, employer interventions and interaction with employers at their sites, and then our training distribution model through across all of the modalities, from online training to a instructor-led virtual training inside the classroom in our facilities, as well as about 10 of our programs are offered through a licensing model, very similar to Red Cross or St. John Ambulance First Aid, and those are available through about 250 licensed training providers across the country. And that's how we achieve that reach, bringing those resources as close to the workplace as we can. One of the other things that isn't mentioned on the screen here is our communities of practice. So those are sort of facilitated forums where we advance initiatives like human and organizational performance, data analytics, and of course we facilitate those the same as we do any of the other technical safety alerts, bulletin guidelines, and any of the other initiatives and training programs. They talk in the bottom corner there about the 72nd, we just completed in May, our 72nd conference, health safety conference in Banff, Alberta. We have that every year and have been doing so since our inception in 1949. We had 950, close to 1,000 paid delegates come in this year for that 3-day conference that kicks off in Calgary with the executive summit that we host. And this year's focus was really on bringing in thought leaders on human and organizational performance from around the world. So it's well attended, well received, and a lot of intense learning and networking taking place out there. Safety expertise really is around facilitation, as I said earlier. Although we have sort of those pockets of expertise within the organization, it really comes from industry, regulatory stakeholders, and our ability through our Center of Excellence to do the environmental scans that take us worldwide to bring those thought leaders together, to gather and analyze the data, as well as assemble the information we glean from those partnerships to drive standardization, continuous improvement, and best practices. All supported by that global network and collaboration talked about earlier. That's driven by the governance. They talked more about the communities of practice there, specifically on the right, and mentioned HOP. We are the Canadian agent for the DROPS program. So we have access to all of those resources worldwide, as do our funding members, and we make those public on our website. Standardized life-saving rules by way of our common safety orientation and the LSR program. Those are aligned with the IOGP life-saving rules. Pipeline, process safety, workplace exposures, and those continue to grow. There's some new communities of practice in the works right now. We also host the Certificate of Recognition program for about the last 25 years. We're the only certifying partner in Alberta or in Western Canada that is a multi-jurisdictional certificate of recognition. So that's quite a benefit for organizations in the service sector, particularly that cross borders to deliver their services. And in the energy sector, most of the services are mobile services. And it's widely supported. And then, of course, we work quite hard with our data analytics group to keep that fresh and defensible. The training side of the organization, like I said, that's about 3/4 of our footprint. It says 3 million training certificates issued. Well, on a year-over-year basis, it's in the 250,000 unique certifications issued. And we have a centralized database. It's underpinned with the integrity I talked about earlier on, where identity validation and academic proctoring and all the expectations that you would have to make this sort of verifiable and credible training right down to the workers at the workplace, with a heavy focus on the supervisors' roles in competency and coaching. As discussed, that nationwide training footprint, or that nationwide reach, not only through the training network of more than 200 authorized training providers, 400 plus instructors, and we reach coast to coast throughout Canada with a few locations in the US as well. Industry safety performance, and one of the strategic opportunities here for Energy Safety Canada as part of this partnership is to take the safety performance of the energy sector really over the last 30 years, and it's been improving year over year. But to partner that with the knowledge and experience of the high reliability industries like nuclear, to that have embraced human organizational performance, a long time ago, and to match that up with our scalability capabilities, right, and sort of take that capability into this partnership and support the partners that way. Moving away from zero, well, that's as we look at sort of new views on safety, human organizational performance, And as measurements become more mature, figuring out what the capacity to fail safe looks like. How do these high reliability industries do it? And Nirmal spoke to that in the nuclear context, and how do we take that and sort of bottle that and learn from that across the entire energy sector, and of course now the emerging hydrogen sector. A little bit more on our footprint here, though. By the numbers, really talked about the training certificates, auditors. We also host part of our communications model in addition to the Banff conference. We host webinars just like these ones, and get the word out there with safety bulletins, safety alerts, and have been doing it for a long time. So that really kind of wraps up the message here, though, with standardization, reputation, credibility, and providing access to those resources, underpinned by the integrity and the scalable, sustainable solutions. That pretty well takes us to the end here.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that presentation. Moving on to our last presenter of the day, Melanie, please feel free to share your screen.
Okay, Tony, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, you're on the
Perfect.
fifth slide, though.
Oh, this is weird. Because I went back to the first one. What about now?
I still see the fifth slide. Maybe try unsharing and sharing again.
It looks like Yvette and my colleague Larissa are seeing the first one, though.
Okay, if everyone else is seeing the
Sorry.
first slide, it might just be an accident then. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So just a quick note to thank you, Tony, for the opportunity to present and for the introduction. And I'm joining today from Toronto. So this is where we have our head office, but we have offices all over Canada, US, and outside North America too. And today I will present a quick overview of CSA Group landscape, which support the hydrogen deployment. And we'll also take a quick look at CSA Group's comprehensive approach to standards, which includes research, education, and advocacy. But first, a quick introduction to CSA Group. So we're comprised of two organizations, the standard development side and the testing, inspection, and certification. So really, this slide is here to depict how social good, which for us includes safety and sustainability, is really at the heart of all we do. But today we'll focus on the left side of the slide, so the non-profit standard development side, which is a member-based association. So I'm thinking about ESC because we do have a lot in common. So you're going to hear things that you've heard before told by Chris. The mission of CSA Group Standard Development Organization is really to enhance the lives of Canadians through the advancement of standards, both in the public and private sectors. And we were established in 1919. We're independent, not for profit. Particularity in the standard development world, we are accredited to develop standards both in Canada and the US, which you'll see later can be useful for coordination with the US, especially on the hydrogen sector. And our standards are really developed by our members. So we have a bit more than 11,000 members, and they're here to help us improve safety, health, the environment, and economic efficiency in Canada, but you'll see also beyond. We take a broad approach to standards. So we have the standard development, but to support that, we also have other programs. We have a research program, and this research program is here to conduct research related to standardization. So it's not in a lab. Our CSA research reports are here to identify where new standards are needed or where existing standards may need to be updated. And it does so by providing evidence-based finding, and it will then help inform the standard content and identify gaps and priorities. These reports are ultimately published on CSA website, and I think it's important to note that they're all available for free. So if you go on our website, you'll be able to download them. I give the links at the end and the examples. We also have an education program. It's here to deliver training and education on our standards to make sure they're applied correctly and help to understand these standards. And finally, we have an advocacy program. It's here to help advocate for public awareness of standards and promote their use. So it's also for the industry, but also for the regulatory community. Quick note, you might all be using standards, but may not exactly know how volunteer standards are developed. So I just wanted to explain that it's really documents that are developed by experts in the field, and they are the one providing the content. So you've heard that from Chris too. We're here to support them, but really the expertise comes from our members. And the objective is to be able to use this document to verify that a product or process is consistent, always consistent, and it describes best practices. The trickiest part, I think, is that they have to be precise, but also flexible with all the innovation coming in. Now, when it comes to the process, they're developed by committees of volunteers, as we said, and the procedures are accredited in Canada and US. We try to have committees that are balanced by interest category. So, for example, we're not going to have just regulators around the table. We're going to have industry, consultant, etc., so that everyone has a voice. And we also try to balance them by geographic representation, depending on the topic. And the members are the ones that are in charge of reaching consensus. So they have to agree on the content. And after that, our documents are going through different stages, including public review, where anyone can provide comments, professional editing, and a final vote. We revise them every 5 years at a minimum. It can be sooner. If there is, for example, a new technology or process that came out, we may need to reopen a reviewing process. Now, let's look specifically at the hydrogen landscape. So I wanted to note that codes and standards are listed in both Canada and US hydrogen strategies as key vector for hydrogen deployment. So it's really highlighted in both documents. In CSA Group, our hydrogen ecosystem will cover standards and research papers from production to end use. And we're having a portfolio of existing standard that we will update to include hydrogen when it's feasible, or we'll develop new one when we can't update the current ones. I will give example of what I mean by updating existing standard. This is a screenshot of our hydrogen infographic. It's available and downloadable on our website, and you can't see it obviously here, but on the back of this infographic, you have all the list of our current standard. We try to keep it updated because it comes a lot. There's a lot of new development. So if you see something missing, you can reach out to me. So following this introduction to our overall landscape, we wanted to share more about our research program first. And why we want to look at this program, it's because research projects are an amazing tool to support hydrogen innovation. We've already published 14 hydrogen research reports, and more will be coming. Some of our research reports are looking into very specific questions, so they can help provide new requirements and guidance for existing technical committees. For example, we have 3 research reports on the effect of hydrogen on pipeline materials. Other reports have a wider look on standardization, and they're going to explore new and emerging areas and provide insight into gap standardization to suggest recommendations for future standards. For example, we have a research report looking at the storage landscape in Canada and the US. Again, all available online, so feel free to take a look. This is an example of one of our research projects on hydrogen classification. I wanted to give an example of how it was launched, developed, and published. So we were listening to our members, and many raised their concern regarding the current informal system of classification that you probably all already know, the famous color coding system with the blue, the pink, the green. On the other end, we are still all using this system, to be honest. It's widely used, and the report explains a bit why and try to explain that. For example, it's easy to use, visually simple to understand, so that's probably some of the reason. This color coding system, as you know, mainly refer to the emission and the production method for hydrogen. But the other aspect we noted is that beyond these emissions, users of hydrogen may value different attributes and criteria of a hydrogen supply chain according to their organization priorities. For example, some of them may be interested in the water consumption. If you're using electrolyzer for producing hydrogen, you're going to use water. Or the human health, where are you buying your hydrogen? And this can vary by community and users. So this report really highlights the importance of developing a formal system to classify all types of hydrogen to help support commercial growth between supplier and consumer. It would help disclose basic information for the consumer. After that, what we did, we took this report and we started developing a standard valid in the US and Canada. It just passed public review, so you should see it available next spring. Now, as previously noted, we often use this research report to support new standard development or update them according to new requirements. I wanted to provide a couple of examples along the value chain of our standard and the different type of document we have. The first one is a good example of harmonization and international collaboration. It's a binational US-Canada adoption of an international standard on electrolyzer. So ISO published an electrolyzer one, and we went to our member and asked, do you think this document can be applied in Canada and US? They said yes, with some caveats. So we adopted it with some deviation. We have other way of doing things. I'm going to give an example after with Z662, which is our oil and gas pipeline system standard, very well known in Canada and very well used. I'm not going to go through, I'm looking at the time and I'm not going to go through the others, but you'll have the presentation. So as we saw on the previous slide, this is an example on how to include hydrogen-specific requirement in existing document. Z662 is our oil pipeline system, and it was first published in the 60s as two documents and then combined later on. In its 2023 version, we now have a new clause which addresses the specificities of hydrogen and hydrogen blends. This document is available for view online, so you can go and check it. But as we know, standard evolves. So in parallel, we launched the three research paper and we published them, the one that I was talking earlier about material, component, and equipment in pipeline and the effect of hydrogen on these. And to ensure that the users then receive adequate support, we also develop educational tools. So there's one that is dedicated on the overview changes from the last edition. Obviously, we're going to also try to intervene in conferences and workshops like this one to share updates. This is another example. I won't go too much in detail, but it's on the hydrogen vehicle side. This is a good example of a collaborative approach. We have a long history of developing standards for alternative energy solution, and most of the time on the hydrogen vehicle side, we're going to work with the international community and other organizations because they do have standards too. So we try to collaborate to avoid having too many redundancies. Multiple international hydrogen standards are actually based on CSA group standards. And we continue to update our key hydrogen standards to reflect advances in this field. So in summary, we launched our first hydrogen standard more than 20 years ago, and our portfolio is always growing based on the user's needs. Our research program is really here to allow us to explore new areas from production to end use. And one of the advantages is that we work in many areas, so that allows us to discuss cross-sectoral strategy and ensure coordination. If you would like to know more, you can always reach out to me. My contact is on the last slide, and I'd be happy to discuss. And these are a couple of links, including our community space where you would receive you just need an email to access it, where you would have all the updates on hydrogen. Thank you for your attention. Tony, back to you.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you to all the speakers today for the great presentations.